Funding the government should be a bipartisan effort, but Republicans chose a partisan path, drafting their continuing resolution without any input from congressional Democrats. Because of that, Republicans do not have the votes in the Senate to invoke cloture on the House CR. Our caucus is unified on a clean April 11th CR that will keep the government open and give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass. We should vote on that. I hope our Republican colleagues will join us to avoid a shutdown on Friday.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Another exciting night here talking politics. Well, as you can tell, Chuck, as I refer to him, even though he's a Democrat, I'm still skeptical at times, but Chuck says that it's a no-go on the GOP budget when it comes to the Senate. Now, he's outnumbered in the Senate. 53 to 47 is the number that he's outnumbered by. Not a lot, but there are a group of Republican senators that are known for not wanting to vote on any budgets. Now, I'm not sure why that is, and if I can get a list of their names, I'll put them down here in the bottom for you before this gets published. But it's a showdown now. Mike Johnson was able to get the House budget through for a continuing resolution with the help of some strong arming from Donald with phone calls to different House representatives. If the House and the Senate both pass the continuing resolution, which is doubtful for at least this time around, because the House decided to go it alone. They held private closed-door meetings and did not invite the Democrats in. They got that bill across by the narrowest of margins. I think it was by 2 votes was how narrow it really was. It was strictly on a party line with one Republican who's now being primaried by Donald for having voted with the Democrats. But let's just say, hypothetically, that for some reason the Senate decides to pass the bill. What happens? Where does all that money come from? Where does it go to? That was a pretty good question, and I fielded a few questions today at coffee about that. And I wasn't completely sure. I was fairly certain I knew what was going on. But basically what it does is it takes the last budget that was approved and it continues those funds for, in this case, the next 6 months. Because we're 6 months into the fiscal year, we have to go until September. So a CR typically extends the previous fiscal year's fundings at the level that the agencies and programs had previously. Unless specified otherwise, spending continues at the same rate as the enacted appropriations. Now, there are some special circumstances, and I had to look a few of these things up, and I want to be able to quote them here, so I've got my notes out. The agency spending authority, each federal agency receives temporary authority to spend money according to the CR. They cannot start new programs unless specifically permitted. So like it says, they're continuing on with last year's money, just rolling it on and continuing as per usual. Some agencies might have restrictions on discretionary spending, which I think is appropriate. Just because you got some extra money doesn't mean you should be able to go out and spend it in a manner not authorized by Congress already. There's time limits. A CR sets an expiration date. Funds must be used within that time frame specified. So in other words, it's very much like federal contracting that I did with our local law enforcement groups when we did purchasing. If you're given so much money and at the end of the year you haven't spent that money, you don't have to give it back, but they're going to deduct that much away from next year's spending allotment for you. So it behooves people to spend their money within a time frame without going into waste. If Congress fails to pass the full budget before it expires, they must pass another CR or face a possible government shutdown. That's what Chuck is aiming for right now. He feels that it's Donald's fault and the Republicans' fault for not consulting with the Democrats, and therefore the Democrats are voting blind on this because they're presenting the bill the day before, and even though it's just 900 pages, it's like, how many of you have read 900 pages overnight, let alone the government? I don't think it's a truly efficient way. I don't think it's an honest way of dealing anything. That's like being handed a business contract and saying you have 5 minutes to read it, sign it. None of us would do that. Now, there's what they call exceptions or anomalies. Congress can include anomalies in the CR to adjust funding, get ready for this, for specific programs that need more or less money than last year. I can hear DOJ's footsteps in there. And just as an example, national security, disaster relief, or urgent public needs. Yeah, I think what they're talking about with urgent public needs would be Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Department of Education, although I do have my own ideas that the Department of Education isn't really serving a useful thing right now. But I digress. The urgent public needs could be scaled back based on the anomalies. Also, if a CR is extended long-term, it can trigger what's called sequestration, which is automatic spending cuts under a Budget Control Act. So there's a couple of ways here that the Republicans can try and work this so that they can get out of giving funding to the government branches that they do want to shut down. Now, what happens if the House passes a bill, but the Senate doesn't? Well, then we're in for a new game. If the House passes a continuing resolution, a CR, but it fails in the Senate, the government faces a potential shutdown unless another funding measure is approved. And there are a couple of ways of doing that. They can do what's called a Senate modification or new proposal. So, in other words, the Senate can take the bill that was sent up by the House and go, yeah, that's not working for us. We don't like the way you did this or the way you did that, or we don't like Chapter 1 or Chapter 2 or items 10 and 15. So we're going to present you with our version of what we want to see. And at that point, the Senate can either amend the House CR and send it back, or they can start their own. And it most likely ends up being the Senate makes out their own. If both chambers pass a different version, so in other words, the House sends up their bill and it's approved by the House, but the Senate sends back another one that's approved by the Senate but not by the House, they can enter into what's called negotiations to recounsel. Now that would involve, and I have seen this before, it involves proposals being sent back and forth rather quickly. It's a rapid fire operation the last time I saw it. Now that's not to say that it'll happen again if that happens this time. But that's if they don't pass and they decide they want to try and build their own. There's also what they call alternative funding measures. And again, I want to consult my notes here. It says here, if a CR fails, Congress can try a short-term emergency CR, even if it's just for a few days, to buy time. Or they can try an individual agency funding bills, which I believe Donald's referred to as, he wants his in one big bill, and other senators want it in 12 small pieces. And the purpose for the 12 small pieces, and I kind of support that method, is that if one of them doesn't pass, 11 more could pass. Okay, you see the point there. If one fails, okay, it fails, and they'll have to go back and look at it, but 11 others could pass, or any number thereof. Or they could pass a full appropriations bill, which is unlikely given the fact that the Congress and the House are so divided numerically with Republicans and Democrats. Or, worst case scenario, the government shutdown if there's no agreement. If no funding measures is passed by the deadline, the government shutdown for agencies that lack appropriate funds. Essential services, which is a nice little list here, military, air traffic control, law enforcement, basically first responders, etc., continue on, but non-essential workers are furloughed. So in other words, we would see the military, the National Guard, air traffic control, police, emergency medical services, fire departments, and other agencies that we don't think about with law enforcement, including probably the FBI. I don't know about the CIA or the NSA or any of those, but they would continue on. So in other words, our national security and safety continues to roll forward. And with the new carve-out that I believe came in the last bill, the executive office gets complete funding. So Donald's office and crew get complete funding so that they can try and keep the government going and try and keep direction going. But, ladies and gentlemen, there's no good scenario here. This is not a left and right. It's not a blue or red. It's not a Democrat or Republican. It comes down to the fact that we've got to start talking with each other, and with Mike Johnson managing to do it behind closed doors at the House level and sending it up with no Democratic view on it. The Democrats got to see it when it was unveiled for voting, thereby forcing the Democrats to not go for it because they hadn't had a chance to read it. Natural assumption. Nobody signs a contract without reading it. If you do, you're a fool. Now, Schumer's now seen at least what the House pushed up, so he has an idea what's going on. And remember, there's no new money. There's nothing going on in regards to new. They're only asking for a CR that allows last year's money levels. So in other words, if the whole budget for last year's government was $1 million, and we've got 6 months left to go on this CR, they want $500,000 to continue on. That's a ridiculously low number. It's just an analogy for everybody to see. There isn't a lot of new spending coming out. Congress has the right to cut back on other things, which I said I can hear Doge's footsteps in there, and I don't think I like that. I think I need to see Chuck present, and when I say Chuck, it's Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader. He needs to be able to present something. If he isn't going to vote for the Republican House bill that's coming up to them, then he needs to step up and he needs to say, I've got something here for you to see, and present it. He needs to have a couple of the Republicans go along with him. He has to have bipartisanship, looking at things realistically like Congress is supposed to look at them. That's what they need. But I digress. That's all going to happen within the next couple of days. And the Dow, again, because of Donald, is now down 4,700 points. It was down 4,500 the other night when I talked to you. It's down 47. And some other interesting notes before we end tonight's podcast. The Midwest tornado season for Oklahoma, the panhandle of Texas, and anything east of Oklahoma and Texas, guess what? It started this week. So we've got the possibility of storms running from March, April, and May through that region. And has anybody heard from FEMA yet? I haven't gotten a phone call from them. You know, I'm not sure that they're still up and running. I'm not sure where their money is. But I do know that Donald is out golfing. Elon's still injecting ketamine, according to his own self-admission. The EU is building a new military because they're not sure that they can count on us anymore, and Canada's still laughing at us. They still got a hold of the power switch, laughing, waiting to flip the switch. But I digress. A little bit of humor. I'm sorry it's dry. My humor comes from a Scotsman who raised me. So with that, folks, I'm going to say thank you. I'm truly blessed and honored that you are all here listening to this. 173 different cities, 53 different countries, and now I understand that YouTube has gotten a hold of me and indicated that they are going to auto-dub my podcast into 7 other languages for people around the world that they can listen to. I've got that much of a spread. They came to me and said this is what they're going to do. Thank you to YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I remind you that we here at Unscripted Political Discourse support the 5051 movement, protests, and the nonviolent events that they're organizing around the world and around the United States. Please look up on your browser, whatever one you use, Firefox, Google, Chrome, whatever it is. Just go to the search line, enter 50501 and hit enter. They'll tell you what's going on. Follow it from there. For my listeners, for my subscribers, thank you. For everybody else, if you wouldn't mind, just hit the like button. Give me a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm, like I always say every night. I really do appreciate it. And for those of you that have made it all the way through to the end here, thank you. I really do appreciate it. With that, I'm going to say good night and have a wonderful evening. Good night.